Greetings. Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Badger. I'm the author of Earth Sky Journal and also an astrological counselor with Elemental Astrology. And
I'm Anna Gatman from expansiveliving.world on Substack.
and we're here to have another conversation together. Last time we spoke about how our lenses of perception can change our realities, and that these are times that we need to show up in a fierce way. And today's theme is about taking the leap, meeting challenges, facing fears, facing doubts in order to meet the astrological theme of the moment, which is our Leo sun with the South Node about to enter Leo in a week or two, and Jupiter with that Leo sun. So there's a few variations on why Leo, which is self expression, the Leo sign is ruled by the sun. So it's connecting with our essence of creativity. And sometimes that essence can be shadowed by doubts, fears, etc. So we thought we would each share some today about our own journey with seizing our creative passion, our desire, and how we faced fears or risks. And so I thought I would throw it over to you, Anna, and ask what's an example of a time when you had a desire where you felt like you had to take a leap into the
Yeah,
unknown?
yeah. So I'm really glad we're talking about this today because last time we spoke about the expansive nature of the planets that are ruling now, right? And that it's very present in my chart, this expansiveness, the fire, the light. Um, and that expansive living is about that. But when it actually comes down to the nitty-gritty, when we have a desire and then we want to do something and then fear kicks in and self-doubt comes in and who am I to think that I can do it and the unknown and all of that is really what happens at the same time. Even when my nature is expansive and I like to take big, bold moves, I mean, I thrive on that. The result is that I just have a big amount of fear that is equivalent to the big amount of desire. It's not like it's easy for me to take big leaps because it's in my chart and I'm fiery and I'm expansive. I just experience big fear because I just decided to do a big leap. So I'm glad that we're going to talk about this today from different perspectives. And there are places where we are parallels and we overlap and places where we come from different places. But I think that the like if I were to pick a story that would be a big, there's so many for me. Um, I always go to the first big one that I remember, which was when I was 18 years old and I was due. So I'm originally born and raised in Israel and I was due into the mandatory military service. That's mandatory for women for 2 years. And my dad had been a pilot and a pilot in the Air Force. So from an Israeli perspective, it was an honor, of course, also to give back to your country. And I had been brainwashed with that. So, um, and I was visiting my mom. My parents had separated. My mother was Swedish, and I was visiting her in Sweden before I was due into the army. And I was chance, karma, um, was recruited by a fashion modeling agent who just asked me if I wanted to be a fashion model and travel the world. And, that might be like a Cinderella dream for anyone. And it was definitely a Cinderella dream for me because I came from a broken home, a home with alcohol and rage, and a pretty horrendous stepmother. So, but still, just like people don't think twice, or until now at least, people go to college in America after they finish school. in Israel, the army is it. You just do it. And there's no other option. And so for anyone listening, it would be like, well, do I want to go for a 2-year mandatory military service in Israel, or do I want to become a fashion model in Paris? Which would you choose? I could use 2 years of a mandatory military service, but I think I'll pick the fashion model, you know? But it wasn't that easy because
Right.
I was on a track, a belief system that was cultural and familial, that you go and do the military service.
That was like a seminal moment of going beyond your conditioning. Like that was the
Exactly.
beginning of
Completely.
anything this
Yes.
Uranus, I'm going to do it my unique way.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage, but you contacted
Yeah.
that place in you.
Yeah. And I deliberated for so then she introduced me to this very well-known um, modeling agent who has passed away since. He was the founder of Elite Model Management, which is one of the big modeling agencies. And he said, you know, you have a look that will either work within 2 weeks or will never work. So come for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks felt like, okay, 2 weeks I can do, right? So but I deliberated for 2 months. For 2 months, I tortured myself with what to do.
Wow.
And because I feared that I would lose everything, my country, my friends, my family. Like that was the risk I took. And I even have tears coming up because it was a big choice. It was a big choice. It felt like I would betray everything I had and I would lose everything I had as a result of it.
So powerful. I mean, because that experience, I know you went on to become a successful, you weren't
Yeah.
kicking after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That experience has been part of your foundation of like shifting identity, that you were able to jump out
Yeah.
and you gave it so much thought, and yet you had to face so much
Yeah.
difficulty in.
Yeah. And I didn't have money. And it was just like, it was like the thing that really, I think at the end I went for it. The fact that it was 2 weeks felt like I still had time to come back to the military service for the due date that I had. But I think that what I identified was this feeling of expansiveness that I hadn't noticed in this way before. I know now I've experienced it many times in my childhood, in my grandfather's garden in Sweden, and in other situations. But it was like there's the way that I've been told, and there's this freedom that's offering itself to me, and I could feel it viscerally, and that sensation has stayed with me and really was the beginning of developing the expansive living method. This feeling of go with that expansive feeling,
Mm,
go with that. Later on, all the other things were go with that feeling, because that feeling was without really knowing, because we don't know, right? The unknown is so big. Um, this feeling of something, the universe was inviting me to a larger version of myself, a more loving version of myself, a more life affirming version of myself. And for sure, you mentioned identity. I think that's a huge piece in making any shifts, right? Because we have an identity that goes with what we believe about ourselves. And we can't do something that we don't believe we're capable of doing.
right.
We
And
could,
the Leo archetype is about identity in a way. It's like about many people in life come up with a false identity. And what I
mm,
feel like you did was contacted an essence inside that wanted to shine through freedom and
yeah,
passion
yeah,
rather than a false persona, which might have been even identifying as the good military person and
right, yeah,
country. And instead you claimed, because it's Uranus, which is the planet that rules Aquarius, which is all about change, all about claiming freedom, is at the base of your chart, as we've talked about many times
yeah,
for listeners, so that you had this deep instinct, because the planets that are at the base of our chart are part of our foundation. They're part of our
mm,
psychic and spiritual foundation, as well as our family enculturation. And so you just followed that note of freedom that you've been following ever since.
I love that you call it the note of freedom. That is such a great, apropos what we talked about last time, if you change your lens, like it becomes like an archetype or a symbol becomes um, a way through which you can see it.
A motto almost, or yeah.
Right. And so I love that because that's what it was like. There was something about it that just say, go for it. And I flew to a country where I could say 4 words, yes, no, hello, goodbye. That was it. Into an industry that was, a dangerous industry when you come as a young girl, in many ways. And and
And
yet something drew me to it. And
you
it
had to
was like,
learn French just on the fly.
absolutely. It
Wow.
took me a year and a half just to begin to understand where a word ends and a word begins. It was just like one flow. I couldn't figure it out. And so I learned it through immersion. Um, and but that feeling, I recall that at that time I realized it was the first time that I said you can have beliefs and values and something comes along and you change them. Because that was the biggest thing I did. I was not going to sacrifice myself for country, for family and country. I was going to do something that felt like the right thing to do, that was life affirming. And I think that the opportunity to become something that was more than what I am, what I saw myself. I was redhead, I was freckled, I had a severe stutter. I hated myself. I had learning challenges that were undiagnosed. I mean, there was enough there for me to go like, this is not for me. I could never be anything else. And yet life offered something that was like, come and be, after 2.5 weeks in Paris, I was booked for my first job, which was a cover on 16 magazine. And I never looked back, never looked back. And
Yeah.
my self-identity changed as a result of it.
Mm.
And that's really, it's a key. If you don't change your identity, your self-perception, then it's very hard to make changes. So these are deep things, really deep things. And I'm just curious, what do you have where you've kind of picked something that you've gone for, where it doesn't make sense or it doesn't make logical sense, but you go for it because something is driving inside that you can't really logically explain, but you follow it.
Well, I want to bring it into two steps. The first was when I got excited about spiritual ideas in my early 20s, living in Washington, D.C., a couple years after graduating from college. And I got into astrology. I mean, I had already been reading astrology, but I started seeing well known lecturers there in
Yeah.
DC. I got into reading about metaphysics and where science and spirituality meet. And I was influenced by Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb, that a friend sent me. And after a couple of years in Washington, it was way too hot for me and way too sort of stultifying. And I was either going to move to California or Toronto. I had this idea I had to make a leap. I just felt
Wow.
California really wound up calling me because of it was at that time back in the mid 80s, a time where spiritual ideas were alive.
Mm.
So I made a leap and relocated myself, and I'm still relocated from growing up in Connecticut and going to school in Rhode Island, an East Coast person in an East Coast family, and I'm a full-on Californian. So that was my first big leap. And, I could go into more about that at some point, but the next leap that I thought to mention is I had been doing astrology counseling since about 2005. And then I realized I really wanted to deepen it into a more psychological, co-creative process rather than me just doing a monologue about what's going on in someone's chart. So I did a couple years training that's an out of the box training. It wasn't an academic training because I always, in my own way, needed to be a free spirit. My own Uranus is in the house of higher learning. And so every time I reconsidered doing a psychological degree program, I got steered away through informational interviews, through different friends saying, why bother doing that? So I just kept forging my own unique path. And after graduating from this training that I did, that I got a lot of confidence in myself as a counselor, I still didn't have a credential. So I had an informational interview with someone local who was a psychologist, and asked his ideas of what could I do to grow my own forays into the world of counseling. Like, where can I do this to get more practice? And he suggested the criminal justice system was one of the places that he said that volunteers can often get involved. And it turned out not long after that, that someone I had gone to high school with, I learned that she was managing a program at San Quentin that she had designed, a men's prison called the Insight Garden Program, where there was real gardening that was being taught and practiced, and then a whole curriculum of inner life gardening. It was a year-long curriculum of weekly classes, and I got to go participate as a facilitator, and ultimately I became the curriculum manager and grounded and created the curriculum. Multiple people wrote it, but I was the overall manager designer. I didn't ground it out of nowhere. The woman who founded it had created it, but I became the grounder. But my point was that that was like a step into growing into the counseling facilitating role that was a passion for me. And I remember the ordeal of getting through the security to get into the prison, into the yard, and you had to take everything off. It was like at the airport, but even more intense because the guards had this intense attitude. And then you'd wind up in the yard, and the guys were out there kind of walking around and checking us out. Many of us were women. There was some men, one man usually that regularly came as the facilitators. And I felt this intensity of like, how did you choose to do this, Diana? Why do you have to put yourself into such intense situations? And yet ultimately I loved the time I spent. It was probably about a year and a half of going, I think it was once a month, driving down to San Quentin, facilitating this group of men who were all there because they chose it. It was like an elective class that they wanted to take. And San Quentin is sort of considered the Esalen Institute of prisons, where there's more help groups available than anything. And this was really a very deep experience of men who were so interested in being forthright and changing and growing and learning. And
wow.
It was just like working with homeless women, which is another population I've worked with, very meaningful to work with people that are marginalized that way, because they're very sincere when they choose to work on themselves. So I would say those are a couple of examples of like taking leaps into completely unknown situations, and both to the West Coast as opposed to the East Coast, and then going into the prison yard.
So can I touch upon something that you mentioned that I also know about you, and that we all go through? There's a term for it, which I can't think of it, the imposter syndrome. But it's part of taking leaps, right? We hopefully will touch on the desire, the fears, the doubts. Right. But like, there's the who am I, right? The who am I?
Yeah.
And there was this point in your story where you say you asked your astrological teacher, right?
Oh, I didn't.
Or you asked someone?
I asked myself.
Oh, you asked yourself because you felt like you don't have a degree. You were never
I thought you meant when I was in the San Quentin Guard. No. I asked I had an informational interview with a psychologist.
Okay. Yeah. That part, and if I may say, I know it about you and I know it about myself, the who am I part. Who am I to do this? Because it has to do with identity. And we said that you have to change your identity in order to be able to welcome something new, right? You can't just put an affirmation on the wall and just hope that this is going to come to you. You need to vibrate in the frequency that brings it to you that can manifest it, and that vibration, you need to change your identity for it. So
Mm,
let's talk about a bit about this places where we felt, who am I? Who
mm.
am I to be doing this? Do you have, if you want to
And
go deeper
I
to
mean,
this story or another one?
that really speaks to the Leo placement with my own chart, because Leo energy of all the 12 signs and where the sun is right now. And like I said, Jupiter is expanding that energy in a big way with a conjunction to the sun. That's the place where we shine our light just unabashedly, like we feel generous and full of kind of love and almost a bit of grandiosity. Like we want to be on stage, we want to let the light of the universe come through us, and yet it can be a very warped energy. And in my sense, it was very warped because it I had grew up experiencing narcissism in my family situation, which is a shadow side of Leo, like taking all the limelight and not wanting anybody else to participate and feeling kind of marginalized. And so I've always grown up in groups, not sharing much, not always, but until my mid 40s, it started to shift. But until my 40s, feeling that if I take the limelight, I'm taking it away from somebody else. And then there's the other components of my chart that are quite shy. So to be able to claim the Leo part in my chart has been sort of a destiny for me. It's where my North Node is. And so who am I to be somebody who did the thing that I swore I would never do, is like be on a stage. And yet I've also was a dancer and I was on the stage in that way. And I've done percussion with a poet. So I've been on a stage in
Yeah.
music poetry events. So I have liked to be a performer, but it's always felt uh, challenging and terrifying. And who am I to be the one that takes up space in this way, or that knows enough? Like the Virgo
Yeah.
is my sign, is the eternal scholar and never feels she knows enough. And
Right.
so it does take a huge leap of faith to just say, I'm good enough as I am. The light comes through me as I am. And I don't know if that.
So what happens at the moment? Because I get and I experience the who am I, but how does it move from that place for you, from who am I to this leap of faith? Is it like who am I when I don't have degrees in astrology in the traditional way,
Right.
to
Yeah.
then going and working in a high security prison? Does doing that give you the confidence to go like, if I can do that, I can do anything? Or is it something else that gives you this moment where you say, I'm taking the leap of faith? Because until you take the leap of faith, you're doubting, you're
Yeah.
not trusting. So what
I would
happens in that moment that it shifts?
I would say it's my deep love and passion for the astrological
Mm,
ideas and the meaning and the whole system that is this cosmology that includes all the wisdom teachers and spiritual traditions that I'm also deeply passionate about. So for me, astrology is an avenue to participate in healing, people. And I feel that people are where we begin the work of healing the planet. And of course, in my writing right now, it's connecting our awareness to the earth, which I think is equally important. So the who am I is fueled by the love for these beautiful, the meaning making vastness of our, like we've talked about, the consciousness of everything being alive,
yeah,
we a part of it. To me, this system is, I don't doubt it at all. I've over and over
yeah,
seen how it's true. And so that gives me the courage
yeah,
to keep, pushing past boundaries of shyness or insecurity or lack of credentials, all of
yeah,
which are
yeah,
big deals to not have all those credentials. For the
right,
longest
yeah,
time, I hadn't written a book either. And
yeah,
everybody I knew had written a book. And that was like also daunting. And now
yeah.
finally I got a book out, which that was, but now I'm happy to just be writing again. It's like
Yeah.
I don't care that much of that I have a book out, but it's nice that I get to say that now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I love that. That I when it comes down to it, if I'd say I'm a devotee of the universe,
Yeah.
of creation. And I didn't expect that. I started as a fashion model and did that for 10 years and went to
So,
undergraduate school and to graduate school. So I never thought I'd end up where I am today. It kind of
right. And
revealed itself step by step for
and
me.
where did you get the who am I to step into expansive living?
Right. Well, I think the who am I experienced the who am I when I had the revelation that spirit and matter are in unity. Um, I was visiting a friend in the English countryside, and I woke up and I raised my head and looked out at the beautiful um, hills, fields, and then hills with forests. And I just had this insight, this knowing, and I've learned since then that I'm clear cognizant. I ask a question and I get such a certain answer that I've learned to trust that.
Hmm.
And the answer and what I saw was the unity of spirit and matter.
Hmm.
That the trees, their physical aspect was the branches, the trunk, the green leaves, but they were also emanating grandeur and peacefulness and beauty. That
Hmm.
was the consciousness part or the non-physical part or the emotional part, the spiritual part. And they were emanating both of them. They were expressing, like when a sunflower is emanating sun
Hmm.
and light, and we all see a sunflower and we smile, it's through its yellow leaves
Hmm.
and the bigness of it in it's just fully, yellow and blooming with brown inside. It is expressing through its leaves, it's expressing spiritual qualities.
And sunflower is a flower of Leo essence. It is
Mm,
because it's
yeah,
the flower of the sun, and the sun rules Leo. It's
right. Nice.
considered sort of the tallest and most radiant of all the
Yeah, yeah,
flowers, and the color of yellow of the sun.
yeah. And so I had at that moment the realization that it wasn't just a yellow flower and then there's spirituality. The
Right.
yellow flower was emanating qualities that in its presence I was resonating with. And if I was smiling in
Mm.
as I saw it, or it lit me up, or I felt joy, that's what it is emanating through its physical uh, attributes. And
That's
so
so
that was a
beautiful.
big realization.
That's so huge. That's exactly what I try to do in my writings with my photography is share about the archetype of the time, how it connects into the natural world, such as flowers. Like I recently wrote about hydrangea, which is also a Leo flower, it turns
Mm,
out, because it's about grandiosity. So
mm,
these qualities that come through nature that are affiliated with the planets in the sky, or the
yeah,
that's all this, we're both in the same business, aren't we? That's why we're talking
yeah,
together, of this
yeah,
interconnectedness through nature, through meaning. Yeah.
yeah. So where the who am I came in after that realization, because then I began seeing everything through that lens, that everything material, and in nature it's easy because nature is so aligned between spirit and matter, between consciousness and matter, or non-physical and physical, that we can feel expansiveness in nature in a very easy way. But everything material is expressing its non-physical aspect. It wouldn't exist if it didn't have a non-physical consciousness aspect first, right? But the who am I came in after beginning to see the whole world in reality in my life through that lens, and then going like, well, traditional spiritual teachings are material things here today, gone tomorrow, and I'm adding and on to the landfill. That is what spiritual traditional teachings are bringing forth, that material things have no value and that we need to separate spirit and matter. On the one hand, they might say to live in the world fully and all of that, but matter has no value, spirit has all the value. And I felt, who am I? Who am I to say no? there is a unity between the two. There's a wholeness, the principle of spiritual material wholeness. Who am I to say that? That was a big one, because I had a voice inside me said, yeah, you're just not spiritual enough. You haven't given up material pleasures yet. And I was going, I lived in Paris for 10 years. When I worked, I saw beauty in architecture. I saw divinity in gardens. I saw, creativity in fashion. I mean, whatever you take, French are known for this craftsmanship in every area of life. That is an expression of divinity. That is taking the craftsmanship to make the perfect bread and the perfect butter and the perfect cheese and the perfect ribbon. And so I suddenly, my life made sense, because I had seen, I suddenly could see the spirit in my material living in France, which before felt, well, I just lived a material life. I was successful, but I had no spirit. So I went looking for spiritual fulfillment, only finding that it was so one-sided as well. So back to just who am I? That's where I had the most who am I? And with time, it was like, who am I? Yes, I am the one who will say, and other people say too, but you don't hear it often.
It's another way that you've expressed your uniqueness and broken from the norm, is to just courageously claim your experience of spirituality through the physical, and also like astrologically in your chart. I can see why an embrace of the material, the beauties of the material and the riches of the material,
Yeah,
is your channel into the divine. And there's
yeah,
no one right or wrong way to have the divine, but I would add that we, of course, we incarnate into the earth. For those of us that believe in reincarnation, we incarnate here for experiences on the material plane. So really, I see you as as a
yeah,
guide to experiencing the sacred here in
yeah,
nature. But of
yeah,
course, the excess, this is the challenge of the time, and right now it's being highlighted with Leo. Leo can be overly grandiose, and we have a certain person in office running this country
yeah,
who's an emblem of that, with Leo rising. And then there's the Jupiter part that can get caught in more, and that abundance that falls out of balance with
yeah,
the actual practicalities of the earth. So we've gotten into this big rock and a hard place problem with, yeah, we've created so many amazing things on this beautiful earth, but we've lost track of honoring and respecting the limits of what the earth's resources are. But anyway, that's another topic.
Yeah.
I wonder about how we might suggest to our listeners ways that they could sort of step into this creative places that we've been talking about, or these risk type places. I wonder how, from the perspective of expansive living, you might suggest people listening, well, how does this matter to me, or what can I do with this?
Well, specifically to the spiritual expressing itself through everything material, it's like it's hiding in plain sight. It's hiding in plain sight, because the things that you have behind you, maybe the painting or the picture you have behind, might hold an emotional component, a memory, a gift from someone, the love of your aunt, if it's a photo of your aunt. And so all our material things have emotional components to them. They have spiritual components to them. They might, when I drive in my car to give a talk, my car is a vehicle for my purpose. It's not just a metal cube that I'm driving through the highway. It's a vehicle for me living my purpose and me helping people awaken. That is a very different experience to drive in my car when I see it that way. So I enjoy my car, because when I'm in my car, I'm driving through space towards manifesting my purpose and towards people to help them have tools and awaken. So the spiritual aspect of anything material is hiding in plain sight, and we just need to look at the hidden part of it, and it can just be an exercise to see what what's hiding in plain sight in your life, in nature, in the plants you love, in the furniture you love, in the room you love, in the people you love, in the work you love. You can just explore that and see what is hiding there, and then you can connect to it. Because like I said, when I'm driving in my car to the supermarket to buy food, I'm driving in order to nourish myself and my family. That's a higher reason. So I enjoy that for that. If I'm giving a talk, it's for my purpose and to help people awaken that. So now I'm driving with that purpose, and I'm feeling very expansive. Even though I'm going through Highway 101 and there could be traffic, I'm kind of high on life because I'm going to my purpose.
Mm.
And it's not, I'm doing my purpose and now I'm driving on the highway, right? The unity is that in the mundane things we're doing, this elevated, if we look to the hidden world that's hiding in the sunflower, in my car, in the picture behind, suddenly we are elevated while we're walking through the material world. So that's one example, right?
Mm. I love that. And it reminds me of what I would leave our listeners with as a takeaway from the astrological point of view, because when you say you're not, well, there's two things that you're saying that I relate to. One is that you're entering into expansive presence with the moment. So whether it's in the garden, presence with the plants, or whether it's in the kitchen, presence with the food or the beauty, that there's always a way in the simplicity to deepen into presence and stillness and receiving the abundance that's right here, which is really beautiful. And I'm thinking about this sense of mission, like when you're in your car, and it reminds me of the polarities between two astrology signs, which is, I think, a very important aspects of astrology, where we think about the signs that are opposite each other. So there are 12 signs, but there are 6 groupings of opposites. And the Leo polarity is Aquarius. So Leo is all about self, and Aquarius is all about we, or the world, or the whole community.
Yeah.
That I know you are on a sense of kind of giving generously of your radiant light and selfhood for the benefit of others, that all of us may transform and find our own expansiveness and joy. And so right now we are shifting, the whole planet is experiencing the nodes of the moon, which indicates sort of a focus point, where it's going to be this way for a year and a half, where the focus point has the south node in Leo now, which means we're wanting to celebrate the wealth of creativity that we have known in the past, and kind of ego development, but we are wanting to be careful not to fall into self-aggrandizement, self-centeredness, any level of excesses, which we're all too plainly seeing on the political stage.
Yeah.
We'll likely be seeing a lot more, like even the movie The Odyssey, which is out right now. Odysseus is the archetype of that sort of Leo radiant light. And it's some astrologers that I've been following talk about how his crew members represent the shadow sides, like they're greedy for his power. And so there's this whole play of the shadow and light part, but the ultimate, goal of the Leo archetype is to find the center, our essence, our home, which Odysseus is all about. But an epic journey like that is in service to the whole. And this is the thing that we can all remember as we are called into finding our own creative projects or explorations that might inspire us, but maybe we feel doubtful or fearful, that we find the courage to step into them at this time, but that we be very aware of how these serve the whole, how
Yeah.
these and include diversity, include the whole earth, include the diversity of people that we meet in our life without judgments, without
Yeah.
prioritizing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that feels.
Yeah. So there's one more point I want to touch upon before we end today's episode, because I think it's an important piece. And that is because we were talking about taking leaps of faith, right? Rising to a bigger version of ourselves, a more expansive version of ourselves, a more life-affirming version of ourselves. And that is to notice and to bring into our life allies and supporters that are supporting us along the way, to not do it alone. And it fits the theme that you're saying. We're going from Leo to Aquarius, right? Even us doing here the podcast, I've done podcasts on my own, I've guest podcasts, but I've also done my own. And there's been a lot of stress around it. Got to get everything right. I need to be talking the whole time. It's so much more interesting and fun to be doing this together. And so, yeah, the focus is not on only on expansive living, but you bring such interesting points. It becomes a richer conversation because we're sharing it. And so
Mhm.
maybe we can just speak to. I have a moment of when someone was a support and a guide, and I don't know if you want to share one, but just to speak to that significance, that because leaps of faith alone are hard to do.
Mhm.
And even when I decided to go to Paris for 2 weeks to try my luck as a fashion model, I had support.
Mhm.
Um, and so why don't you go and then I'll share
Oh,
my
well, what comes to my mind is when you served as an ally for me when I was at a point of realizing that my website needed to be updated. And we had a visit together one time and you had a look at it. This was a long time ago. And you really helped inspire me with the sort of the vision for what it could be, and also just encouraged me to sort of go for it rather than have it be this background thing that, in the best of all worlds, I would seize the day and find a new website designer. And you really helped catalyze that
yeah,
happening to me. And I wound up actually using your website designer. And once I created my newer website, because I had invested a lot in it, that inspired me to start blogging because I wanted to finally like make an online
mm,
presence that was there. So I started blogging from
yeah,
that website. So that was really valuable to have a friendship like ours, where you were very interested in
yeah,
helping inspire me to step further into my work in the world.
yeah. Nice,
Yeah. How about
nice, yeah.
you?
So it really just takes, I mean, first of all, I can't help myself. I always do that. I always I want to pour fire into people.
Yeah, I know that about you, and I'm
So
lucky to bask in the afterglow of it.
So sometimes it works, and sometimes I get, and no, no,
Right.
I want to go with my own pace. Usually that's like family members, but with clients, it's more like, okay, we're going to go at your pace. Here is an opportunity or a possibility if you wish to take it. Sometimes with family and friends, it can feel more forced, but it is my nature. And it comes out of love, a desire for you to be in a more loving, self-affirming life and version of yourself.
Mhm.
So, so back to the modeling story. When I met with John Casablancas, who was the head of elite management and who told me to come to Paris for 2 weeks that was in 1977. Um, then he said at some point, and I don't know why he said it, because I explained I have to go to the army, I can't just leave. And he said, if you want to get something, you have to give something. I don't know why he said it, because I didn't say I'm dreaming of being a fashion model. I don't mean, but he said, if you want to get something, you got to give something. And it kind of stayed with me. Um, and I got so much. My life changed, my self-identity changed, my confidence changed. I mean, I went from from Cinderella in my family, the ugly duckling at school, to a top fashion model in Paris, Europe. I mean, it was so unexpected. And I think that the piece of it is that what he said was a very small sentence. When I inspired you, you might feel like it was a big thing, but it was a conversation. You were over here, we had a conversation. That 1 degree shift can compound into something very, very big.
It's interesting. It's almost like just having a challenge laid out for you. Like he said, you want to get something, you have to give something. In that was a challenge to give something.
Yeah.
Like and giving is actually a Leo feature. Like to create, to give, to be generous is something that lives inside all of us. Secretly, we all long to give. This is why people
Yes.
in partnership, because we want to give.
Yeah.
We want to serve. That's another strong metaphor for not metaphor, actual impulse for people, especially who the whole planet. So I was responding to your suggestions of you could up level or whatever. You weren't telling me what I had to do, but I had it. And the same thing with him. He wasn't saying you've got to, do this. It was more subtle than that. But I love that those who challenge us on some level are our allies.
Or who support us, right? The psychologists who you met with and said, why don't you volunteer in the prison system? That was like, it was a suggestion. And you say it just happened to be within a very short time. I realized that a friend of mine was like, this is like the universe, because it's conscious, it begins to organize in the direction. So we're also not alone, not just because we as humans are supporting each other, but also because we're never alone, because we live in this web that's conscious. And if you start having a thought in one direction, the universe starts organizing in that direction for you. So, but not to do it alone, I think, is important, right? That is the shift in consciousness. And it's not easy because we are born into individuation and we are taught to do it alone. And what, like, can't I do a podcast on my own? Can't you just do this? Can't you do that? It's like, of course we can do it if we think about it. But the resistance is big because it's hard or it's lonely or we don't believe in ourselves. And then somebody else gives us a nugget and it moves us forward.
I think that's really so much about the essence of Leo partnering with Aquarius too, because Leo off-centered wants to be king of the mountain and thinks it can do everything and just call out orders. And that creates an off-kilter world that we've seen. We've been there, done that. The presence of ego and glamour and king of the mountain. Now is a time to reframe this and partner with others and find that any person that we meet on any given day can be our partner in some way, or it can be a plant or an animal or a creature or the ray of sun, that everything, we are in partnership with everything, and that this Leo light wants to shine into and through and receive this divine partnership with all life, not just our own ego.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, this feels like a good place to end. Thank you again for such a rich, in breadth and depth, conversation. And until the next time, thank you and blessings to you all.
Yes, blessings to you all.